Hello, and welcome to the Sleepy Mythologist, a quiet corner of the world where ancient myths come to life in whispers, not roars. Tonight, we journey into the mysterious and unpredictable world of Norse mythology. Our guide, none other than Loki, the trickster, the shapeshifter, the god who walks between mischief and mayhem. But before we begin, take a moment to settle in. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let your thoughts float like mist through the 9 realms. And tell me, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Are you nestled under warm blankets in Canada, drifting to sleep in the quiet hills of Scotland, or maybe wrapped in the desert breeze of Egypt? Wherever you are, you're welcome here. Now let's gently begin. Long ago, before the world was shaped as we know it, before even the first frost touched the branches of Yggdrasil, the world tree, there was a land of endless cold and another of blazing fire. From the clash of these two ancient forces the cosmos was born, and so too were its first beings. Among these early spirits was one unlike the rest. His name was Loki, and though he would come to dwell among the gods of Asgard, he was not one of them by blood. Loki's origins were strange, woven between two worlds. He was the son of a giant Fabauti, whose name meant cruel striker, and a mother whose name, Laufey or Nal, meant leaf or needle. Some say she was a goddess of the woods. Others say she was a lesser being, clever and quick like the wind through dry grass. From this union came a child both brodorskirst, bright and dangerous, as if made of lightning. He had the blood of the Jötnar, the giants, the old beings of chaos and strength, but he also had a sharp mind, a silvery tongue, and an elegance in thought that none could match. Even as a young boy, Loki was unlike the others. While the giants roared and fought, he listened. He watched. He waited. He asked questions no one else thought to ask. Why must things be the way they are? Why not twist them a little? Why not laugh, even when the world seems full of storms? His laughter echoed differently. Not cruel, but not kind. It was laughter that bent reality just a little, like a mirror showing you not what is, but what could be, if you turned your head the right way, or the wrong way. In time, Loki came to Asgard, the shining realm of the gods. How he came to be there is still debated in the mists of myth. Some say he helped Odin in a time of great need. Others whisper that Odin saw something in him, a flicker of brilliance, or perhaps of danger, that was too powerful to leave wandering free. Whatever the truth, Loki became blood brother to Odin, the Allfather. Not son, not servant, but bound by a sacred oath, sealed not just in words, but in shared drink and destiny. The gods of Asgard welcomed him, though warily. Thor, strong and brave, called him friend more than once. Freya eyed him with suspicion and curiosity. Frigg, the queen, often remained silent when he entered the hall, as though she saw something deeper in his heart than he ever let on. And Loki, well, he seemed to enjoy the role he had found. He walked among the gods as if he belonged, but never quite let them forget that he came from elsewhere. He made them laugh, sometimes until their sides hurt. He solved problems no one else could solve, often problems he secretly started. But for all his charm, there was always something coiled beneath the surface, a restlessness, a hunger. Loki did not seek power the way others did. He didn't want a throne or a kingdom. He wanted movement, to stir the still waters, to whisper questions into sleeping minds, to watch what would happen when you tip the first stone and let the others fall. He was beautiful, in his own strange way, shape-shifting and androgynous, able to appear as a man or a woman, a fish or a fly. He flowed through the worlds like a dream, never quite pinned down, and this made the gods uneasy, even as they laughed at his stories or listened to his clever advice. Loki never struck first. He never roared like the giants or ruled like Odin. He smiled, he suggested, he slipped things into place, and by the time anyone noticed, the wheel had already turned. But in those early days, the gods still believed they could keep him close and harmless, like a fire warming the hearth. They did not yet understand that fire, when left to its nature, will eventually seek to burn, not out of cruelty, but simply because it is what fire does. And so Loki remained, among them, but apart, a spark in golden halls, a question inside a world that demanded order, and the 9 realms would never be the same again. The golden halls of Asgard were alive with music and merriment. The gods had gathered for a grand feast, and the fires burned warm, casting flickering shadows across the stone walls carved with runes older than memory. Mead flowed freely, and laughter rose like birdsong into the high rafters. It was a time of peace, and the gods felt safe. They had pushed back the frost giants. The sun rode steadily across the sky. Their children were growing strong and bright. Inside the great hall of Valhalla, Odin sat upon his high seat, his one eye glittering with quiet thought. Frigg was at his side, serene and wise. Thor drank from a horn larger than most men's arms, slapping backs and boasting of battles won. Balder, radiant and gentle, smiled as he spoke with his mother. The goddess Idun handed out golden apples, ensuring the immortality of all who tasted them. There was music, played by Bragi the bard, and tales told of old conquests, love found and lost, and the mysteries of the stars. It was truly a perfect evening, until the door creaked open. No one had invited him. But there he stood, Loki, tall and thin, with eyes like cold fire, and a smile that didn't quite reach them. His step was soft, silent even, like a fox entering a den of sleeping wolves. He held no weapon, wore no armour, but as he stepped into the feast it felt, as it always did, as if a chill wind had slipped through the door behind him. The room grew still, not in fear, not yet, but in recognition. Loki was no stranger, but neither was he ever quite a friend. For a moment he stood there, watching them, and then he spoke. "Why," he said, his voice smooth as smoke, "have I been left out of such fine company?" No one answered. Thor's hand went to his hammer, almost by habit. Frigg lowered her gaze, but Odin simply watched. Loki moved further in, step by step, weaving through the tables as if gliding on mist. His smile widened. "I see the mead flows well. The apples are sweet. The laughter generous," he said. "And yet, no cup for Loki. No seat at the table for the one who once helped you build the walls that protect this very hall." There was a pause, a long one. It was true. Loki had helped them before, many times. He had outwitted giants, retrieved lost treasures, even saved the gods from their own mistakes. But he had also caused a fair number of those mistakes in the first place. Loki tilted his head, his voice taking on a sharpness that still somehow stayed soft. "Have I not earned my place, Allfather? Have I not danced on the edge of blades for you, lied for you, bled for you?" Still no answer. And then something changed in him. His gaze darkened, and the air seemed to thicken, like fog on a mountain pass. When Loki's moods turned, they did not scream, they slithered, and now they coiled around the gods. He began to speak, no longer with the tone of a guest, but of an accuser. He called out each god by name, not with insults, but with truths, sharp, hidden truths. He reminded Freya of her secret journeys to distant lands. He whispered of Thor's reckless anger. He laughed at Odin's endless quest for wisdom that left him blind to what was already at his side. He told tales no one had ever spoken aloud, of betrayals, desires, and fears buried beneath layers of glory. And the gods sat frozen, because Loki did not lie. He simply revealed the cracks beneath their golden masks, the wounds beneath their armour. Some rose to strike him, but Odin held out his hand. "Let him speak," said the Allfather. And so Loki did. He poured out his bitterness like poison in honey. Softly, elegantly, terribly. Why did they use him only when it suited them? Why was he always the outsider, the shadow, at the edge of the fire? He had given them so much, and yet they always looked at him as if he were a storm they hoped would pass. Loki's words wrapped around the feast like a serpent. Not a single goblet was raised. The music had died. Even the fires seemed to dim. And when he had finished, when the last truth had been spoken, he turned and walked out. No one stopped him, not because they agreed, but because they feared what would happen next. The gods had feasted many times before and would many times again, but none would ever forget the night Loki arrived uninvited. The night the hall of Asgard fell silent, not from war, but from words, words that dug deeper than any sword, and planted the first seeds of chaos yet to come. In the peaceful light of Asgard's early morning, a stillness settled over the golden city. The dew glistened on the grass that lined the paths of the gods, and soft winds rustled the leaves of Yggdrasil's distant branches. All seemed quiet, harmonious, and safe, but not all things in Asgard were ever truly still. not while Loki walked its shining halls. On this particular morning a goddess slept peacefully in her chamber. Her name was Sif, wife of Thor, known far and wide for her radiant hair, the colour of ripened wheat at harvest, long and golden, flowing down her back like sunlight captured in silk. It was said that no other goddess in the 9 realms had hair so luminous, and even the elves and dwarves admired it from afar. Loki, meanwhile, had been wandering, restless as ever. His mind never sat still for long. Some days his mischief was harmless, a clever prank, a whispered word that made 2 gods quarrel, only to laugh later. But on this day mischief would walk further into darkness, and the gods would begin to learn that not all of Loki's jokes ended with laughter. Why he did it, no one truly knows. Perhaps it was boredom, perhaps envy, or perhaps he simply wanted to see what would happen if beauty was suddenly taken away. So Loki slipped into Sif's chamber as the morning light gently crept across her skin. She breathed softly, dreaming, her golden hair spread like a golden waterfall across her pillow. She looked like a painting, like something even time dared not disturb. But Loki, full of quiet, dangerous ideas, approached with a blade, not of steel, but of enchanted sharpness, silent and cold. He smiled faintly, and with careful, deliberate movements he began to cut. Strand by strand he severed the golden locks. They fell like whispers to the floor, and Sif did not stir. By the time he was finished, her head was bare. The light no longer caught on her hair, it simply passed by unreflected, and Loki, satisfied with the strange finality of his deed, slipped away as silently as he came. When Sif awoke and saw what had been done, her scream echoed through the halls of Asgard. It was not a scream of pain, but of loss and humiliation. She touched her bare scalp, tears running silently down her cheeks, and tried to understand why such cruelty had been dealt to her in her sleep. It did not take long for Thor to find out. The Thunder God was known for many things, his strength, his courage, his booming laugh, but he was also known for his temper, especially when those he loved were harmed. And when he saw his wife standing in shame, her hair gone, her eyes filled with sorrow, his rage shook the clouds themselves. He did not ask who had done it. He knew. Loki. Thor found him near the edge of Asgard, looking out over the Bifrost Bridge, as if nothing in the world could trouble him. Loki turned, that same sly smile on his lips, perhaps already thinking of some clever excuse, but Thor would not listen. He lifted Loki off the ground with one hand, his fist trembling with fury. "I should crush your bones," he growled, his voice like distant thunder, "and scatter them into the wind. What you've done to Sif cannot be undone." Loki, despite the choke of Thor's grip, remained calm. He had no weapon, no allies, no defense, except his words, and that for Loki was always enough. "Wait! Wait!" he gasped, managing to speak through the pressure. "It was a joke, a trick, yes, but one I can fix. Let me go to the dwarves, the sons of Ivaldi. Let them craft hair more radiant than what was lost. Hair spun of gold itself, living gold, that will grow on her head like the real thing." Thor didn't answer at first. He stared into Loki's eyes, seeking even a flicker of remorse. But there was only the usual dance of amusement and calculation. Loki's mind was already spinning stories. Finally, Thor dropped him. "Go," he said. "But if you fail, if you come back without what you promise, I will break every bone in your body." Slowly. Loki bowed, mockingly, perhaps, or maybe just habitually, and then he vanished, slipping through shadows toward the realm of Svartalfheim, where the dwarves made wonders in their forges beneath the earth. The dwarves were master craftsmen, born of stone and fire, their hands calloused and darkened by their craft, their eyes bright like coals in a forge. Loki found the sons of Ivaldi and told them of his misdeed, though perhaps he left out a few details and begged them to help. Moved by challenge, or perhaps by the promise of praise from the gods, they agreed. And so deep underground they went to work. They melted gold not into coins, but into threads. They whispered to it, sang to it, wove it into something that lived. Hair of sunlight and flame, soft as silk, warm as life. Hair that would grow like real hair, and glow like stars. When it was done, Loki smiled. He had what he needed, not only to fix his mistake, but perhaps to outdo himself. For mischief in Loki's hands was never quite done. He would return with more than just golden hair. He would return with gifts, for the gods, for himself, and for the next chapter of chaos not yet written. But all of that was still ahead. For now, Sif would have her beauty restored, and Thor would stay his wrath. But something had changed. The gods no longer saw Loki as merely mischievous. Now they understood. His jokes could wound. His tricks could tear at the heart of their peace. The golden halls of Asgard would never again feel quite as safe, because now they knew what Loki was capable of, even while they slept. Deep beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, past caverns carved by time itself, Loki walked through the smoky halls of Svartalfheim, the realm of the dwarves. The fires never died in these underground forges. Hammers rang like distant drums, and the air shimmered with heat, thick with the scent of iron, coal, and molten magic. He had come to fix what he had broken, or at least, that's what he told the gods. In truth, Loki was thinking far beyond golden hair, because in the smoke of the forge an idea had begun to grow in his mind, like a spark, small and dangerous. What if instead of merely mending a mistake, he used this chance to shift the very balance of power among the gods? The dwarves were the finest craftsmen in the 9 realms. They could forge objects that defied time, that sang with magic, that whispered to fate itself. Loki knew this, and he knew something else as well, how to use their pride. He first went to the sons of Ivaldi, a gifted trio whose work was spoken of in sagas and sacred songs. They were quiet, focused, and efficient, shaping treasures as if pulling them out of dream and fire. Loki praised them lavishly. "Surely," he said with that ever-smooth voice, "you are the greatest smiths in all the realms. No one else could craft such wonders, not even Brokkr and Sindri." The names hung in the air, heavy and deliberate. He knew the rivalry between dwarves ran deep, and the sons of Ivaldi, hearing those names, stiffened. Their eyes narrowed. They did not speak, but Loki saw what he needed. Pride had been stoked. The spark had caught. He told them of Sif's hair, and they agreed to help, gladly, for it was an insult that a goddess had been wronged while they, master craftsmen, had not yet had the chance to impress her. So they got to work, and not only did they craft the living golden hair for Sif, soft, radiant, and ever-growing, but they also forged 2 more gifts. The first was Skidbladnir, a ship made for Freyr, the god of fertility and prosperity. It could fold into the size of a handkerchief and fit into a pocket, but when unfolded, it was vast and powerful, always catching the wind and always finding its way no matter the seas. The second was Gungnir, the spear for Odin. Perfectly balanced, it never missed its mark. It was a weapon of such precision and strength that even the thought of it made lesser gods stand straighter. Loki accepted the gifts with many smiles and many bows, but his plan wasn't finished. As soon as he left the sons of Ivaldi's forge, he hurried to the workshop of Brokkr and Sindri, the brothers whose pride was as deep as their skill. Loki stepped into their smoky den with a look of mock curiosity. "I've just returned from the sons of Ivaldi," he said casually. "Their gifts are truly remarkable. Golden hair that grows like life, a ship that fits in your palm, a spear that never misses, incredible things." He waited, letting the silence fill. "But of course," he added, with a sly glance, "none of it could possibly match what you could create, right?" Brokkr's hammer slowed. Sindri looked up from the bellows. A challenge had been made. "And what do they wager?" asked Sindri, his voice like gravel and smoke. Loki leaned in. "Why not make it interesting? If you create treasures greater than theirs, I will return to Asgard and declare you the finest craftsman in all the realms." Brokkr crossed his arms. "And if we lose?" Loki paused, then grinned. "Then you may take my head." The dwarves laughed, not because they doubted themselves, but because they knew exactly what such a wager meant. Dwarves took pride seriously, and Loki had just placed his own body on the line, and so the forge was lit again, and the bellows roared. Sindri worked the metal, and Brokkr pumped the air, never letting the fire die. But Loki had no intention of playing fair. As Sindri worked the bellows and placed the first item into the furnace, Loki transformed himself into a small biting fly. He buzzed around the forge looking for the perfect moment. As the first item, an enchanted golden boar, was being shaped, Loki bit Brokkr on the hand. But the dwarf did not flinch. His hands were steady as stone. The boar emerged shining with its own light. Gullinbursti, the glowing boar, swift as the wind and radiant enough to guide travellers through the darkest night. Next they forged a mighty ring, Draupnir, a golden arm ring for Odin. Every 9th night it would drip 8 new rings of equal value, a symbol of abundance, wealth, and eternal giving. Loki bit again, this time on the neck, but still the dwarves did not falter. Then came the final creation, the weapon for Thor, a hammer unlike any the realms had seen. As the molten metal took shape, Loki bit down hard on Brokka's eyelid, drawing blood that blurred his vision. Just for a moment, his hand faltered at the bellows. The result was nearly perfect, nearly. The hammer, called Mjolnir, was unbreakable, fearsome, and deadly. It could crush mountains, call down lightning, and return to Thor's hand after being thrown. But its handle was shorter than intended. Too short for 2 hands. A flaw, minor but visible. Still, when Loki returned to Asgard with all 6 gifts, he gathered the gods and laid them out like jewels on velvet. He spoke with flair and flourish, presenting each treasure with poetic praise, his voice as smooth as still water. Sif's golden hair, which shimmered like morning sunlight, Skidbladnir, the magical ship, Gungnir, Odin's flawless spear, Gullinbursti, the radiant boar, Draupnir, the golden ring of infinite wealth, and Mjolnir, the hammer that would become Thor's greatest weapon. The gods were astonished. They marvelled, argued, and finally judged. Though the hammer had a flaw, its power was greater than anything they had seen. It could protect Asgard from any threat, and so the victory was given to Brokka and Sindri. The dwarves turned to Loki. "Now, Trickster, your head is ours." But Loki, as always, had one more trick. "Yes," he said, smiling, "you may take my head, but not my neck. That was not part of the deal." And so they could not cut it off. Furious but bound by honour, the dwarves instead sewed Loki's lips shut, stitching his smug smile closed with thread of unbreakable wire. For a while the trickster was silent, but silence, like sleep, is only ever temporary. And Loki's mind was never idle for long. There was a time when Asgard stood vulnerable. Though the gods were mighty and their powers vast, they knew that the walls surrounding their realm, strong though they seemed, could not hold forever against the forces stirring beyond the horizon. Giants roamed the lands of Jotunheim, fierce and cunning, always seeking ways to breach the halls of the gods. The winds whispered of coming wars, and the sun, though bright, seemed to carry the memory of storms. And so one day a stranger came to Asgard. He arrived alone, cloaked in mystery, his voice low and steady. He stood tall, his face half hidden beneath a hood of ash-grey wool, and he carried with him the presence of someone who knew his worth. He offered the gods a deal. He would build them a wall, an unbreakable wall stronger than any ever seen in the 9 realms. A wall high enough to keep even the fiercest giants at bay. A wall that would encircle all of Asgard and protect the gods for eternity. The gods, gathered in council beneath the high dome of Gladsheim, listened carefully. They did not yet know who this builder was, whether mortal, giant, or something else, but they saw the ambition in his eyes, and they heard the certainty in his voice. Then came the terms. He asked for a price, one that made the hall fall silent. In exchange for building the wall, he wanted Freya, the most beautiful of the goddesses, goddess of love, of fertility, of golden tears and deep mysteries. He also wanted the sun and the moon. It was, by any measure, an outrageous demand. The gods turned to one another in disbelief. How could they give up the sun and moon, the rhythms of night and day? And Freya? How could they sacrifice her for stones and mortar? They were ready to reject the offer entirely, until Loki spoke. Loki, standing off to the side with arms crossed and a curious expression on his face, stepped forward with that familiar gleam in his eye. He suggested a compromise. Let the builder try. Let him build the wall, but give him an impossible deadline. "If he can complete the entire wall," Loki said softly, "on the first day of summer, unaided by any man, then and only then shall he receive his reward." It was winter now. The ground was frozen. The days were short and dim. The gods murmured among themselves. No one could build such a thing in such little time. Odin narrowed his eye. He did not trust Loki, but neither could he ignore the logic in the trickster's plan. And so they agreed. But the builder made one request of his own. He asked to use his horse. The gods hesitated, but Loki, eager to test his scheme, assured them it was harmless. And so the deal was struck. The builder began his work the very next day, and with him came his horse, a mighty stallion named Svadilfari. No ordinary animal, this horse was strong beyond reason, hauling stones the size of mountains with speed and grace. The gods watched in growing unease as the wall began to rise, stone by stone, faster than they had imagined. Winter days passed. The wall grew tall, the foundation was flawless, and by moonlight Svadilfari dragged more stones than any beast of burden in the known world. Whispers filled Asgard. The gods began to worry. They had made a mistake. The builder was not just skilled, he was supernatural. They began to suspect he was a giant in disguise. As the final days approached and the wall neared completion, Freya's face grew pale with dread. The gods who once laughed at the impossibility of the task now stood at the edge of panic, and so once again they turned to Loki. "This is your doing," Odin said. "Now undo it." Loki, realizing that his clever plan had turned dangerous, bowed his head. He promised to fix it. No tricks this time, just a solution. And so, under the cover of twilight, Loki disappeared into the forest. What happened next is a tale whispered in the shadows of myth, not always told in polite company. Loki transformed himself into a mare, a beautiful, alluring horse, with a coat like moonlight and eyes that shimmered with starlight. He trotted through the woods until he came upon Svadilfari, who had wandered slightly from the building site. The great stallion lifted his head, ears twitching. He saw the mare, and desire stirred in him. Loki, graceful and swift in his disguise, led the stallion away, deep into the trees, cross hidden paths and frozen streams. Svadilfari chased, forgetting his purpose, forgetting the wall. All night they ran, and the next night and the next. The builder, now without his powerful companion, could not complete the wall. He raged, he cursed, and finally in his fury he revealed his true form, a towering frost giant, his skin the colour of ice, his eyes glowing with hate. But it was too late. Thor, summoned by Odin, came down like a storm cloud. With one mighty swing of Mjolnir, he shattered the giant's skull and sent him tumbling into the myth. The wall remained, strong, nearly finished, though it would always have a small gap in the north where Svadilfari had once hauled stones. The gods praised Loki for his quick thinking, though no one asked where he had gone those many nights. No one spoke of the strange glow in his eyes when he returned. But some months later, Loki reappeared with a child, a small, peculiar creature, with 4 legs, a long mane, and 8 powerful hooves. "I've named him Sleipnir," Loki said gently. "He's the fastest horse in all the 9 realms." Odin took the strange foal as his own steed, and so Sleipnir, the child of trickery and mystery, became the horse of the Allfather. The wall was built. The gods were safe, but once again they had learned a lesson. Loki's cleverness could save them, but always at a cost, and in every solution there was a secret. In every triumph, a touch of chaos, and in every laugh, a shadow waiting to grow. Among all the strange and shifting stories that swirl around the trickster Loki, there is one that the gods never spoke of lightly, for it touched not just their world, but the fate of all worlds. This was the tale of Loki's children. In the beginning, Loki had married a goddess named Sigyn, a loyal and gentle soul who loved him despite his unpredictability. With her, he had children who were quiet, innocent, and full of light. But this is not their story, for in another realm, darker, colder, and filled with ancient magic, Loki fathered children not with a goddess of Asgard, but with a giantess of Jotunheim named Angerboda, whose name means she who brings grief. From that strange and secret union came 3 children, 3 beings so unusual, so powerful that the moment they were born, the fabric of fate itself began to shiver. The first was a great wolf, born not from flesh and blood alone, but from wildness and prophecy. His name was Fenrir. Even as a pup, he grew faster and larger than any beast had ever grown. His eyes burned with an intelligence that made the gods uneasy. He was not mindless. He watched, he waited, and he learned. The second child was a serpent, Jormungandr, so long that even as a newborn he coiled around entire mountain tops. His scales were slick and black as the deepest ocean, and he hissed in a language older than speech. As he grew, the ground trembled beneath him. The skies darkened when he stirred. And the third was a girl, half beautiful, half decayed. Her name was Hel. One half of her face was the soft skin of a young maiden, gentle, pale, almost regal, but the other half was bone and rot. Her eye sockets were hollow, her lips pulled back in a frozen grin of death. She did not weep, nor did she laugh. She simply watched, with the stillness of the grave. When news of these children reached Odin's ears, he called a meeting of the gods. They knew that Loki had always been unpredictable, but this was something far more troubling. These were not ordinary offspring. They were omens, living symbols of destruction. The Norns, the ancient weavers of fate, had whispered of a time when Loki's children would rise, when the wolf would devour the Allfather, when the serpent would choke the world, when death itself would open its arms to all who lived. So Odin made a decision. One by one he dealt with the children, not out of cruelty but out of fear, and the terrible duty of one who sees the end before it comes. First Odin took Jörmungandr, the great serpent, and cast him into the sea that circles Midgard, the world of men. He sank beneath the waves, where he grew and grew, until he encircled the entire globe, his tail resting in his mouth, biting it with quiet rage. He became known as the World Serpent, slumbering in the ocean's depths, waiting. Next, Odin turned to Hel. He saw in her a strange power, the ability to govern what the gods could not, the dead. He gave her a realm of her own, deep beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, in a place called Niflheim. Cold and dark, it became the final resting place for those who died not in battle, but in sickness, old age, or sorrow. Hel ruled her realm in silence, surrounded by shadows and the souls of the forgotten. She did not rage, she did not rebel, she simply waited. And finally there was Fenrir. Odin could not cast him into the sea, nor could he exile him to the underworld. For Fenrir was not just strong, he was alive in a way that frightened even the gods. He ran across the fields of Asgard, each stride wider than the last. The gods watched him grow, his fur black as the void between stars, his breath like cold wind through steel. Only Tyr, the god of war and justice, dared approach him. Only Tyr fed him, trained him, spoke to him, and Fenrir trusted Tyr, for a time. But even trust could not calm the gods' fear. So they gathered, and they plotted. They would bind the wolf. First they forged a chain of iron, thick and heavy. They called it Leidinga, and with careful words, they asked Fenrir to test his strength by breaking it. Fenrir agreed. He was still young and proud of his power. He broke the chain with ease. Next they made a stronger chain, twice as thick. They named it Dromi, and again they asked Fenrir to try it. Again the wolf agreed, and again he shattered it like dry wood. The gods began to worry. The wolf was growing stronger than even they had expected. So they turned to the dwarves, those same dark forging beings beneath the mountains who had made the treasures of the gods. They begged them to make a binding like no other, not of metal or stone, but of magic. The dwarves crafted Gleipnir. It was a ribbon, thin as a strand of silk, soft to the touch, and shining like moonlight. But it was made from impossible things. The sound of a cat's footfall, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the breath of a fish, and the spit of a bird, things that do not exist, and because they do not exist, they cannot be broken. The gods returned to Fenrir with Gleipnir. When they asked him to test it, Fenrir paused. Something in him, instinct perhaps or prophecy, told him this was no simple game. He looked at the gods. He saw their false smiles. He smelled their fear, so he made one demand. One of them must place their hand in his mouth while he was bound, a token of good faith. Only Tyr stepped forward. The ribbon was wrapped around Fenrir's legs. It tightened. It shimmered. And then Fenrir tried to break it. He twisted, he thrashed, he roared, but he could not break free. And in his fury, his jaws snapped shut, severing Tyr's hand. The gods stepped back. Fenrir howled, betrayed. They took him then and bound him to a great rock on an island far from sight. A sword was placed between his jaws to keep them open, and from his eyes tears fell like silver rain. The gods turned away. They had secured their safety. But Loki's children were not gone. The serpent still coils in the sea. Hel still sits on her throne of shadows. and the wolf still struggles against his chains. They are patient, and the day will come when the bindings will break, but for now, they sleep. And so may you. There are few sounds in all the 9 realms more mournful than the growl of a chained wolf who once ran free beneath the open sky. The gods had built palaces of gold, spun clouds into halls, and woven starlight into the hems of their robes. But beneath all their glory lay a hidden fear, a quiet, persistent dread that stirred whenever they looked to the edge of the world, where the wild things live. And of all the wild things, none inspired more fear than Fenrir, not only because of his strength, not only because of his jaws, which could crush bone and bite through steel, but because of the silence in his eyes, a silence that seemed to say, "I know who you are, I know what you have done, and I will not forget." When Fenrir was still young, he had been allowed to roam the fields of Asgard. His paws, though massive, barely made a sound against the grass. He would run for hours, shrieking like a shadow across the meadows, his breath curling in the air, his tongue lolling in the joy of motion. He was not evil, he was not savage. He was simply a creature of immense power and destiny. At first, the gods tried to be kind. They fed him enormous slabs of meat. They watched him with wary smiles. But with each passing day, Fenrir grew larger, stronger, smarter. He began to understand things. He noticed the way their laughter quieted when he entered. He felt the way their eyes followed his every movement. He heard the whispers behind closed doors, the talk of omens, and the weaving of fate. Only one god treated him as an equal. Tyr, the god of war and justice, was brave enough to meet Fenrir's gaze. Day after day, Tyr brought him food. He spoke to him with calm words and a steady voice. While others feared the wolf, Tyr offered something different, respect. And Fenrir responded. He let Tyr touch his thick fur. He let Tyr near him without growling. Sometimes, when the moon was full, they would sit quietly under the stars, saying nothing, simply sharing the night. But still, the fear grew. Odin, the Allfather, had wandered far and deep in search of knowledge. He had sacrificed an eye to see what others could not. And he had seen something terrible, a vision of the end of all things. Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. And in that vision, Odin saw Fenrir. He saw the great wolf rise with fire in his eyes. He saw the sky torn apart by the beat of wings and the crash of jaws. He saw his own end, his final breath, taken not by spear or flame, but by the crushing bite of Loki's son. And so the gods acted. They called Fenrir before them. Smiling gently, speaking sweet words, they told him of a game. A test, they said, to see how strong you've become. Surely a creature as mighty as you can break any chain we place upon you. Fenrir, sharp of mind and steady of heart, looked around. He saw their grins, he smelled their nerves. He tilted his head, and yet he trusted Tyr. So when the gods brought forth the first chain, he allowed them to wrap it around his legs. They laughed, as if it were a harmless sport. Fenrir flexed. With a snap like thunder, the chain burst apart. Shards of metal flew like sparks. The gods clapped nervously. Fenrir yawned, unimpressed. A second chain followed, heavier, darker, made from the ore of the deep earth. Again Fenrir let them try. Again he broke it. But then came the third chain, not iron, not stone, a ribbon, silky, soft and thin, barely thicker than a thread. It shimmered like moonlight on the calm water. Its name was Gleipnir. It had been forged from impossible things, from the sound a cat makes when walking, from the beard of a woman, from the roots of a mountain, from the breath of a fish, from the spit of a bird, and from the dreams that never quite wake. The gods presented it with innocent faces, as if it were just another test, but Fenrir, grown wise, did not step forward. He sniffed the ribbon. He studied their eyes. "This," he said in a voice that rumbled like distant thunder, "is no game." He looked at Tyr. "If I am to be bound by this strange thing," he said slowly, "then I must ask one thing of you. One of you must place your hand in my mouth as a pledge of honesty." Silence fell over the gods. Only Tyr stepped forward. Without hesitation, he placed his right hand between Fenrir's massive jaws. He did not speak. He did not tremble. And so Fenrir allowed the binding. The ribbon was wound around his legs, around his paws, around his powerful shoulders. He tensed, he pulled, he twisted and roared. But Gleipnir held. It did not tighten, it did not slacken, it simply was unbreakable, unending. And Fenrir understood. He had been betrayed. He clamped down. Tyr did not cry out. He did not beg. His hand was gone, but his honour remained. The gods, meanwhile, stepped back, some with shame, others with satisfaction. They dragged Fenrir to a lonely plain far beyond the walls of Asgard. They drove a sword into his jaws to keep them open, forcing his mouth into a permanent snarl. His saliva ran like rivers, forming the cursed stream called Van, meaning hope, twisted, bitter and false. And there he lies, bound, silent, but not forgotten. The wind still howls around him, as if whispering apologies that came too late. His muscles still strain against the ribbon, testing it, waiting, because one day the binding will break. One day the ribbon will unravel like smoke, and Fenrir will rise, not as a villain, not as a beast, but as a creature who was once a pup, muzzled by fear, punished for what he might become. And when that day comes, the sky will split, and all will remember the trust that was broken, the hand that was lost, and the silence of the chained. But for now, the wolf sleeps, and you may sleep too, for in dreams even chained wolves run free beneath silver moons. There are few stories in the realm of the gods as sorrowful as the tale of Balder. Balder, the Shining One, beloved son of Odin and Frigg. He was not like the other gods. He did not carry a hammer or a spear. He did not seek war nor boast of conquest. Instead, he radiated peace, wisdom, and gentleness. His presence brought calm to even the fiercest of tempers. His laughter could still the wind, and his dreams, when he had them, seemed to brush against the edge of prophecy. The flowers bloomed brighter where he walked. Even the stones were said to grow warm beneath his feet. The creatures of the world paused when he passed, as if they too felt the sacredness of his spirit. And so, all loved him, all but one. But before the tragedy unfolded, there came a whisper, a shadow, a dream. Balder began to see visions at night, dark shapes, cold winds, falling stars. He saw himself descending into darkness, into Hell's realm, where no laughter echoed and no warmth could reach. He awoke in a sweat, trembling, the glow of his light dimmed. Odin, hearing of his son's visions, grew silent. And Frigg, the All-Mother, whose heart beat with the pain of all mothers who have ever feared for their children, acted quickly. She rode from realm to realm, across mountain and forest, river and root, speaking to all things seen and unseen. To the earth she whispered, "Hurt him not." To the fire, "Spare him." To stone, to metal, to beasts of air and water, "Do no harm to Balder." And all of them agreed. All things, great and small, took oaths to never harm the shining god. Satisfied, Frigg returned to Asgard, and the gods rejoiced. They held games in the golden courtyard. Balder stood proudly, his smile wide, as the gods hurled rocks and spears at him, knowing they would bounce off harmlessly. Even Thor with all his strength could not bruise Balder's skin. It became a game, a celebration of their power, their safety, their beloved friend's immunity to death. But in a shadowed corner of the feast, Loki watched. He did not smile. He did not laugh. He watched the way the gods adored Balder. He listened to their praise, their cheers, their blind joy. And deep inside, something twisted. Loki, for all his cleverness, had never been adored. Feared? Yes. Needed? Often, but never beloved. And Balder, in all his light, cast long shadows. So Loki, quiet and curious, changed his shape into that of an old woman. Frail, cloaked, bent with time. In this form he went to Frigg, who sat alone beneath the boughs of a tree, still weaving protections for her son in her thoughts. The old woman sat beside her and asked, kindly, softly, "Is it true that nothing in all the realms can harm your son?" Frigg, unaware of the disguise, nodded gently. "Yes," she said. "All things have sworn never to harm him." "All things?" the old woman asked again. Frigg hesitated. "All but one," she admitted. "A small thing, a slender shoot of mistletoe. It seemed too young, too harmless to be of any concern. I did not ask it." Loki's eyes gleamed behind the mask of age. Mistletoe. That night, he crept deep into the forest. Under pale moonlight, he found the plant. Delicate, pale green, its white berries glowing faintly in the dark. He plucked it gently, not with anger, not with rage, but with purpose. Back in Asgard, the games continued, and there stood Herder, Baldur's brother. Blind from birth, he stood apart, listening to the laughter he could not see. Loki approached him quietly, placing a small dart in his hand. "Would you like to join the game?" he whispered. Herder hesitated. "I cannot see. I would miss." "Don't worry," Loki said gently. "I will guide your hand." And so Herder, innocent and unaware, threw the dart. The mistletoe flew, small and silent, and this time it did not bounce. It pierced. Baldur stumbled, and he did not cry out. He fell, and he did not rise. A stillness like none before fell over Asgard. The gods froze. The sky darkened. No one moved. No one spoke. Odin, who had faced monsters and giants, stood in silence. Frigg's hands trembled. Thor clenched his fists, but there was no enemy to strike. Baldur, the god of light, of hope, of beauty, was gone. Grief swept through the realms like a cold wind. Even the rocks wept. Even the stars dimmed. Frigg, broken with sorrow, begged the gods to find a way to bring him back. Odin, ever seeking knowledge, rode to Hel herself, to the shadowed realm of his granddaughter. There, he pleaded, and Hel, unmoved but not cruel, made an offer. If all things in the world weep for him, she said, he may return. And so the gods asked all things to mourn. The trees, the rivers, the winds, the animals, even the stones. And all did. All but one, a single being hidden in a cave, refused. She was a giantess named Thok, cloaked in mystery. She stood still, her voice cold. "I see no reason to weep for Baldur, Del," she said. "Let Hel keep what she ha." Some say it was Loki in disguise. Others believe it was someone else entirely. But the result was the same. Baldur did not return. And the light that once warmed Asgard never quite shone the same again. A crack had formed in the perfect world of the gods. Not loud, not wide, but deep. And it would widen, slowly, until the day the end would come. But that day was still far away. Tonight the story rests, and so may you. Close your eyes and let the tale settle like mist. For even in sorrow there is still peace. And even the longest night carries a sliver of dawn. After the death of Baldur, something in Asgard changed. The golden halls still stood tall, the stars still wheeled above them in their slow, silent dance, and the gods still gathered for their feasts. But the laughter was quieter now, the music more subdued, the light dimmer, as if the very air mourned the absence of Baldur, the god of joy and brightness. Even the flowers that once bloomed effortlessly in his presence now opened more slowly, their petals uncertain. And Loki, the one who had set the terrible fate in motion, walked among the gods not with pride but with watchfulness. For though he tried to smile, though he made clever remarks and told cleverer lies, he could feel it, eyes following him. Cold glances, quiet withdrawal. The gods were changing too, and slowly, silently, so did Loki. He vanished more often now, gone for days, then weeks, then longer. When he returned, he brought strange gifts, odd laughter, or tales that made no one laugh at all. The charm that once danced in his voice became something brittle. His eyes, once full of mischief, now held something darker, something wounded. The gods tolerated him less and less. Odin said nothing, but he saw everything. And then came the final straw. It is said that Loki, emboldened by his previous escape from punishment, took things too far one last time. He had broken their trust before, but now he mocked it. He disguised himself, slipping into gatherings in shapes not his own, whispering terrible things to those too foolish to recognize him. At one banquet, during the long winter night, Loki arrived uninvited once more. He stepped into the feast like a shadow crawling across warm firelight. The gods, dressed in their finest robes, paused as he entered. The music faltered. The food grew cold. He looked around, his smile thinned, and began to speak. Not with jokes, but with venom. He recited, one by one, every secret the gods had tried to forget. He told of Freya's travels to dark places, her hunger for strange powers. He revealed how Odin had once sacrificed more than just his eye for knowledge, hinting at deeper, darker bargains made in silence. He mocked Thor's temper, Baldur's death, even Tyr's missing hand. Each word was like ice, and still he did not stop. He told truths wrapped in cruelty, jokes sharpened like blades. His voice, once playful, now rang with bitterness, and the gods, stunned at first, sat in silence, until Thor stood. Mjolnir, resting beside him, hummed softly, eager. "You've said enough, Loki," Thor said, voice heavy as thunderclouds, "and you will answer for it." But Loki laughed. He transformed before their eyes, shifting into a salmon, a bird, a fly, mocking them with every flutter and flicker. He fled Asgard, vanishing into the wilderness, hiding in caves and beneath rivers, slipping between worlds like some pork through cracks in stone. The gods searched, and they searched, until at last they found him. Far to the north, beneath a frozen mountain, Loki had taken refuge. Disguised once more, he had built himself a house with 4 doors, facing every direction so he could never be surprised. By day he remained still. By night he turned into a salmon and swam in the cold streams that flowed through rock and time, but the gods had grown wise. Odin sent word through the trees. Heimdall listened to the whispers of the wind. And Thor, unstoppable as ever, came with fire in his eyes and patience worn thin. They cornered Loki at the water's edge. He leapt into the stream, flickering like silver, darting through currents. But Thor reached into the cold and caught him, tight, strong, unyielding. Loki struggled, writhing like the serpent he once fathered, but he could not escape, and the gods brought him back. This time they would not be tricked. This time there would be no second chance. They took Loki far from the light of the sun, deep into the caves beneath the world. There, in a chamber of stone, they bound him. With ropes made from the entrails of his own son, cruel magic older than pity, they tied him to 3 slabs of rock, where no wind could reach and no dream could soften the silence. Above him they placed a serpent. Its fangs dripped venom, slow and steady, drop by drop onto Loki's face. The pain was beyond pain, a burning that never ended. And yet, his wife Sigyn still loved him. She stayed beside him day and night, holding a bowl above his head to catch the poison. She stood in silence, unmoving, her arms growing tired, her eyes heavy, but never leaving him. Only when she turned to empty the bowl did a single drop fall. And in those moments Loki screamed. The earth trembled at the sound, then mountains shook, the seas stirred. For those were not storms. Those were the echoes of a god's agony, and so he lies, even now, bound in darkness, beneath root and rock, between punishment and prophecy. He lies waiting, for one day the bonds will break. Not today, not tonight, but someday. Until then, he dreams, not of revenge, but of silence, of the sky, of the fire he once carried so lightly in his hands. And the world above him turns slowly. The gods look to the horizon, and you can rest. For this tale too must sleep, and the trickster lies still, if only for a little while. There is a hush in the farthest corners of the world, a quiet that lies beneath the rustle of trees, deeper than the silence beneath mountains, older than even the whispers of the stars. It is the stillness of waiting, the pause before the storm, the breath held in the chest of the cosmos itself. For though the gods still walk their golden halls, though the sun still rides across the sky and the moon still follows behind, the end is coming. The seers have seen it. The Norns, who spin the threads of fate, have whispered its name, Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. And at the heart of that twilight is the trickster. Loki. He lies still now, bound beneath the earth. The serpent above him still drips its poison, and his wife Sigyn still catches it with her bowl, her arms trembling from years of quiet devotion. But the threads of destiny cannot be cut, only followed. One day, no one knows exactly when, the ground will begin to tremble. The forests will shiver, the oceans will swell, the stars will blink with unease. And deep in the heart of the earth, the bonds that hold Loki will begin to crack. The entrails that tie him to stone will loosen, the serpent will flee, its task complete, and Loki will rise. Not in Hado this time, but in flame. He will not return as a jester. He will not wear the mask of the clever fool. He will come as something else, something fierce, something final. The gods, too, will feel it. Odin will climb his throne once more, watching the gathering storm. Thor will grip Mjolnir, knuckles white. Freyja will ready her warriors. Tyr, with one hand, will lift his sword, and Heimdall, guardian of the Bifrost Bridge, will blow his horn. Its sound will echo across the 9 realms, calling all beings, gods, giants, beasts, and mortals, to their final hour. And so the old enemies will rise. The frost giants, cold and cruel, will march with eyes like broken glass. Surtur, the fire giant, will come with flames dancing in his beard, sword blazing with the heat of dying suns. The Midgard serpent, Jörmungandr, will uncoil from the sea, rising so high that his body blots out the sky, his venom turning oceans black. And Fenrir, Loki's son, will break free from his chains at last. His paws will pound the earth, his breath will scorch the trees, and with eyes burning like twin eclipses, he will run straight toward the one who feared him most, Odin. The two will meet on the battlefield, and they will not speak. There will be no words left. Fenrir will devour the Allfather, swallowing him whole, and in turn Odin's son Vidar will avenge him, tearing the wolf's jaws apart with silent, unflinching strength. Above them the sky will burn. The moon will vanish, the stars will fall like rain, and amidst it all, Loki will find Heimdall, the watchman of the gods, and the two will fight as equals, as mirrors, one who sees everything and one who reveals what no one wants to see. Their battle will be fierce, and in the end they will fall together, locked in death, side by side, no victor, no survivor, only silence. And when the last god breathes his final breath, when the fire consumes the forests and the seas rise over the mountains, when the world tree trembles and the ground splits open like a forgotten dream, a great darkness will fall, and it will seem like all is lost. But endings are never truly endings, for beneath the ash seeds wait. From the ruin of the old world, a new one will rise, green fields, clear skies, gentle rivers running beneath golden sun. 2 humans hidden in the branches of Yggdrasil will emerge, Leif and Lifthrasser, life and love, nourished by the morning dew. Balder, once lost to death, will return from Hel's realm, bringing light with him once more. The gods will not return as they were, but something new will take root. The world will begin again, softer, wiser, made from the memory of pain and the promise of peace. And as this new world turns beneath the heavens, the tales of the old gods will be told in quiet voices, by firelight, by rivers, in dreams. People will speak of Odin, the seeker of wisdom, of Thor, the protector of Midgard, of Freya, the weeping goddess of love, of Balder, the light that died, of Sigyn, the quiet strength, and of Loki, the trickster, the father of monsters, the breaker of peace, the spark of chaos. Some will hate him, some will pity him, and some will wonder what might have been if only he had been loved differently. But all will remember him, because no story is whole without shadow, no light exists without the dark, and as you listen, in the stillness of your room, beneath your own sky, know that these stories live on, not only in the stars or in sagas, but in you, in your dreams, in your thoughts, in the quiet part of your heart that longs for meaning. And now, the tale is told. Let your breathing slow, let your thoughts drift like leaves on the surface of a calm lake. Let the gods return to their rest. And you, return to yours! Sleep now, for even in the realm of chaos, there is peace.